Hello, and welcome back to another Eduonics tutorial. My name is Matthew Brown, and I'm your instructor for this course. So far in this course, we've covered several sections: getting started in Photoshop, how to use the tools in Photoshop, and getting acquainted with Photoshop's workflow. In this video, we'll be starting a new section, Photo Correction. We've already been using some of Photoshop's healing tools to help correct photos, but we only made minor corrections on very small parts of the image. How do we go about correcting an entire photo? One issue photographers run into is perspective distortion. This is a result of either taking a photo at an undesired angle or using a camera lens that provides a wide-angle shot but curves and distorts its edges. These aren't necessarily bad things, but many serious photographers turn to Photoshop to help achieve their desired photos after they've already taken them. I have a photo here of a large front porch. It's a decent photo, but you can probably tell that something isn't quite right. The angles of these arches aren't quite centered, and these steps below are way off. I'll pull up some perfectly straight lines to show you what I mean. I'll just go up to View, Rulers. Then I'll click inside these rulers and drag out to place my guides. I'm going to place a few near the columns. Then I'll place a few near the steps. You can see that the columns aren't actually too bad, but the steps definitely don't look right. I'll hide my guides by going back up to View, Show, Guides. Then I'll put my rulers away by going back up to View, Rulers. A very easy tool to correct perspective is actually one that I've touched on before. I'm going to go in the Tools panel and right-click the Crop tool to get to my Perspective Crop tool. Then I'll start by making my first point near the edge of these bricks on the top left. Then I'll go all the way across for my second point in a similar area on my bricks. Then I'll go down to the edge of the steps for my third point. Then I'll go all the way back across on the steps to make my final point. This box I just drew will represent the new perspective I want the photo to have. I'll just drag the edges out to encompass most of the photo on the left and right, and on the top, and on the bottom. Now to commit this, I'll just go up in the tool options and click on the check mark. Okay, my image has been corrected. I'm going to pull my guides back up to see how I did by going up to View, Show, Guides. Okay, not too bad. The steps towards the bottom still look a little bit askew, but overall this is a good perspective change. As you can see, using the Perspective Crop tool can be very quick and pretty effective. I'm going to switch gears here and go to my next image. Okay, so this image is suffering from some perspective distortion as well. But you can see it's got some lens distortion too, as the edges of the photo seem to curve out from the center onward. I'm going to need something a little more powerful than the Perspective Crop tool for this. I'm going to try a lens correction filter this time. But before I do that, I'll duplicate my layer by checking the Layers panel to make sure that my background layer is selected. Then I'll hit Ctrl-J on my keyboard to jump or duplicate this layer above itself. Now that I have a copy of my original image, I'll go up to Filter, Lens Correction. Similar to what I did to the previous image with the guides, I'm going to go down here to where it says Show Grid, and I'll turn that on. Now we have a better idea of what needs to be done. If I check in my options here on the right, you can see it's currently set to auto correction. While auto correction sounds nice, it can only work if I know more details about this photo, such as the camera's make, the camera's model, and the lens model. Unfortunately, I don't have that information. I'm just trying to fix this photo the best that I can. So I'll go here to the top of the options and switch over to Custom. Wow, there are a lot of sliders here. Hopefully, I won't have to change all of them to get what I want. I think first I'll focus on this option near the bottom, Vertical Perspective. I'll go ahead and start sliding this to the left and pay attention to these two main columns in the middle of my image. Now what this is doing is stretching the right and left sides of the top of the image to match the width of the bottom of the image. Okay, it's looking good at about -30, so I'll keep that there. Now I'll go up to the top and use this slider called Remove Distortion. I'm going to slide this to the right while focusing on this curved roof here. What this is doing is actually puckering the image from the middle, sort of pulling the center sides in while pushing the edges out. And it's looking pretty good at about +40, so I'll keep that there. This image looks a lot better. I'm going to go down to Scale and shrink this whole thing down to around 75%. So I can see what the lens correction has done. As you can see, the edges have really been puckered in, and the top is now wider than the bottom. I'll bump the scale back up around 90% and click OK. Now I can compare my original layer to my lens corrected layer. Original, corrected. It's definitely a noticeable improvement. Not bad for only having to play with 2 different sliders. I want to keep both of these, so I'm going to rename these to Original and Lens Correct. There's one more method I want to show you. It takes a little more work, but it's probably the most effective out of all of them. First, I'll select my original layer. Then I'll hit Ctrl-J to duplicate it. Then I'll drag it to the top of my layers. Now I'll go up to Filter, Adaptive Wide Angle. Normally, Adaptive Wide Angle would rely on my photo's data to fix this automatically. But once again, I'm going to go custom. So I'll go to Correction and make sure I have Fisheye selected. Then I'll go down to Scale and bring it down to around 85% so the image will have some room to breathe. And I'll keep my crop factor at 10. Then I'm going to start sliding my focal length down from 7.07. You can see it's already starting to distort my image. I like it right here, around 3 millimeters. Here's the cool part. I'll go up to the top left and make sure I have my constraint tool selected. Then I'll go down to the left edge of this planter and just click and drag to the right. You can see that my line is already curving, sort of following the edge of the planter. I'll go ahead and release this on the opposite side of my planter. The constrain tool has taken my curved edge and straightened it out. But it looks like the curve was a little bit off in the middle. There's a little box here that I can click and drag to match the curve perfectly. My goal is to make this entire image perfectly level. But so far, all these constrained lines will only straighten the edges I use them on. If I want to make my line perfectly level, I can just right-click it and click horizontal. Now the planter edge is perfectly straight and level, and Photoshop is automatically warping the rest of the image to try to match my line. If I want to make a perfectly level line without having to do any extra steps, I can just press and hold the Shift key as I'm dragging the line. Constraining in this way isn't limited to just horizontal lines. I'm going to go to these columns, hold the Shift key, and make some vertical lines. Since this image curves more towards its edges, the idea is to start with a straight foundation in the middle, then work my way outwards. I'm going to really work on this image. I want to use adaptive wide angle to its fullest extent. I'm just going to repeat this process, finding curved edges, and using my constrain tool to correct every single one. Okay, I am done. I'm going to go back to scale and bring this back up to 100%. Then I'll hit OK and see how it measures up with my other layers. Wow, that's a huge improvement. Here's my original, my lens correct, and my adaptive wide angle. You can see that with lens correct, I made a very quick correction, but it ended up warping the building improperly. It exaggerated the height of the building and neglected a lot of curves on both the right and left sides. But now, with the adaptive wide angle, everything is where it's supposed to be, and the edges of the building line up with each other beautifully. There's just one more thing I want to do. There's a big hole in the middle of the ground here. I think I'm just going to crop this out. I'll go up and get my regular crop tool, click in my image, drag up to cover it, and click Enter to commit my crop. Beautiful. Okay, we learned that you can use the Perspective Crop tool to quickly correct the perspective of an image. We learned that we could use the Lens Correction filter to quickly fix perspective and lens distortion. And we learned how to go in depth with our corrections using the Adaptive Wide Angle filter. That will do it for perspective distortion. I'll go over some more photo correction techniques in the next video.